This is the first episode of a new talk show called Listen Loco. Now, as you might have guessed by not only the talk show title, but by the fact there's only two boxes here, it's only me and it's Loco, you're already getting the basic premise of the show, I feel like. At least the more observant ones are you. Like, this isn't WWE. We've never had, like, a mystery guest come in and a third box drop down. You know, whose music is that? Oh, my God, it's LS. Like, comes in, you know, you guys are fucking doing everything wrong. A robot in your position would have said exactly the right thing. And, like, you know, that's never happened, right? So it's obviously me and Loco. Now, this is a show where, first of all, the title, which I've got to claim credit for, because we were trying to think of a good title. And obviously, the reason why this is a good title is because in a lot of Loco's shows, you know, he gets very impassioned, you know, he starts giving his opinion, and you have to tell him every now and then, listen, Loco, and then you drop science on him, hopefully, if you do a good job, and it sounds amazing. So you can see the premise we're setting up here. We enjoyed the thought of the world's coverage we did, right? We're going to make it more of a serious thing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I mean, this is going to be a spiritual continuation of Summoning Insight.
Yes.
As Monty likes to refer to me as lesser version of Monte Cristo.
Yes,
so
less successful version of Monte Cristo, yeah.
in some ways, it's Summoning Insight. I'm Budget Monte Cristo. I'll live with that title. I love Monty, so
okay.
Yeah, I'm down with that.
And then the premise is like, much like Summoning Insight, you know, some weeks the show will be just us. We'll talk about topics when we want to, or when it's appropriate. We'll get a guest in and we'll have some player or someone in the industry or who knows who. I mean, there's a lot of people with our combined knowledge of the industry we could draw from here, Loco. It's not just me having to hustle and get everyone nowadays, and then Monty getting like 3 of his friends once a year. Like, you might actually be 2 people pulling their own weight on this one. So let's start off. I thought a good topic to talk about on the first show, because we're obviously launching this during the off season. For most people, they're like, oh, what's there to talk about? To me, that's a crazy question, by the way, because if you've ever followed the off season of any sport, there's a million things to talk about. What should they have done differently? How's the scene going to change? Who's going to join a team? What could change with this squad? Who needs to change? Who can stay this? There's a million areas you can go. So let's start here, right? This Worlds was very unique in the perspective that there's been different metas for each World Championship, sure. But I don't think there's ever been one that was as drastic. And obviously, the reason why it ended up looking very drastic is it's the first time maybe ever there was a meta that didn't seem to suit the top Korean teams, which is why it was so shocking, the results. So bearing in mind what you've seen, how much of this do you think continues to 2019? Like, is League as a game going to be like this from here on out? It's going to be a similar kind of meta. Can Riot actually control these things? Can they sort of keep it in this sweet spot if they want to? Would that be a good thing? Where do you go with this? There's a lot of, we can open up on a lot here.
So Riot wanted this. Riot actively wanted less scaling and more fighting and less vision and then just more skirmishes early. So Riot wanted this and they controlled this and they made this meta happen purposely. As for like Koreans not being good at it, the meta's been in some ways very, very stale for about 4 to 5 years, where it was about scaling, it was about late game team fights, where Koreans really mastered that. And when things changed, like they didn't change with it. So I think the meta is going to be a little bit of balance of this and more scaling. Riot is going to want to introduce a little bit more scaling. They do want to see more late game champions come into play. And from what I saw in like the dev update for like the preseason stuff, one thing they wanted was game being a little bit less snowbally and the laning phases lasting longer. They were adding some kind of like shields to turrets where you can't immediately kill the turret early game, where they're going to have like little like bonus HP things in the early game. So like you just getting killed or you just getting 4-man dobe at level 6 doesn't mean you immediately lose your turret. So definitely meta is going to change. I don't think it's going to stay this way. And I also think Koreans are going to adapt to the new meta. Like after getting their ass smacked at Worlds, I can't imagine Korean teams just being like, oh, well, like, guess we didn't win this year. They're like grinding their teeth. Like they want to win next year.
Yeah, I also think like the whole Korean angle, because we can slide into that next, because that was obviously a big part of it, is like, one of the crazy things about the way the Koreans played this year is I noticed fans get really mad, right, if you mention, oh, I think, you know, Griffin would have done amazing if they'd gone to Worlds. Because they think, right, what you're doing is you're just making an excuse. And the excuse is like, oh, you know, it wasn't the right Korean teams that went to Worlds. Now, while in the past people might have done that, and I would agree on some years maybe it is a bit questionable, I think part of the problem with this is because no one knew coming into Worlds what the meta would be. Like, it was clearly different from even the summer splits in every region. Like, there's a world in which the teams that might have done better didn't get a chance to qualify in that meta. That's why they're not at the Worlds right now. So it's actually logical that they could have been better, but didn't get here. And in fact, I think the obvious example that makes that the case is Gen G, because Gen G could only have made this Worlds in a qualification system that didn't have this meta. If this meta had been here, they would have no chance whatsoever. They would have never gotten out that gauntlet. Doesn't matter who they would have lost to. Griffin, Kingzone, all these teams would have beaten them if we'd have had this current meta right now. We can play around strong solo lanes and you can't scale to late game. That was Gen G's entire game, and that was also how they were able to like offset Crown having problems, you know, is put him on fucking Malzahar, just have him sit in the mid lane, like all these things you can't
or
do
don't
now.
play him at all and play Fly.
Exactly. Yeah, this is what they were actually doing. That's what's ridiculous, right? So the mad thing is, I could see a world in which some of those teams would have done better. So that's why I also don't worry as much myself for 2019. As long as you don't get a radical meta switch, I think the right Korean teams get to a tournament, and there will definitely be Korean teams who can adapt. Like, the idea they can't entirely is a bit whack. I do agree with you. One thing that makes it weird is that there were certain key elements of the meta that did stay the same for so many years. How you control vision, how you play around vision, how you play, like you say, with scaling comps. I mean, Samsung squads are a great example of that in the modern day, because they basically did that for 3 years. They just played scaling comps, and they knew as long as we survived the first 25 minutes, we have a chance to win the game. And at that point, you're not prepared for that. You don't play around those win conditions. We have the advantage now. This is where we're going to win the game. Well, the problem is, that had become so successful as a general approach that it was like every Korean team's base concept. Like, even if you did something different around that, that was the way you thought was like the right way to play. I'm doing like air quotes when I say that. The difference is that normally in most games, you don't stick to one approach, you know, because a lot of games, like for example, single player games, each person has his own unique style. Well, it would be like the equivalent of in games like StarCraft. Sure, in StarCraft, okay, generally you want to play a macro style. You want to make all the right basic decisions, because that way you don't win on like the luck of like a bit of a micro. You win on like making the correct overall meta decision that is better than his decision, and that will win you more games than trying to go head to head with someone mechanically and out micro them, or, you know, try and win like a risky timing or something. The difference is, this is the equivalent analogy would be if we went into a StarCraft Worlds, as it were, where it was all about like unit strength and early game fighting, and about having like was I the guy who, you know, picked the right time to send out 4 zealots versus if he'd done like a defensive base timing. In this, I sound like fucking LS right now because everyone just knows StarCraft's like, I don't know any of the things he's saying, Thorin, but you can get the general point I'm making is like, people fought like in StarCraft. There's a general way to teach people to play the game. And they were right most years. They were not wrong, by the way. It's just that unfortunately for this one Worlds, that became like, not even a bad skill set. You still could have potentially have won doing it, but it became like the premium was on other aspects of the game. And amazingly, they weren't aspects that Korea had been very good in. Like, I want to throw this out to you. Here's an angle I thought was kind of weird. Is that because the Royal Never Give Up team, first of all, they were very good last year, if you remember, at last year's Worlds, where they almost beat SK Telecom. Like, they had already beaten the Samsung team in groups. They were very good back then. This year, when they were winning everything, I actually think in some mad way, they ended up getting the most fucked by the meta switch. Because even though old Chinese teams loved this type of player, like play around strong individual players, skirmish all the time, be very bloodthirsty, that's like what old Chinese teams loved. A Royal Never Give Up was the first Chinese team that played like a truly Korean team. Like, they could do it all. They had amazing ability. They had great players in every spot. And if anything, they got exactly the wrong meta to show that off in. Like, they could have beaten the Koreans heads up if this had been last year or 2 years ago. They could have actually done it. So in a weird way, even though it ended up helping China because IG won, I feel like RNG are the ones who got kind of fucked because they could have done it the old way. They would have gotten full credit from Koreans as well.
Yeah, I mean, you know what the funny thing about the whole RNG situation is? If RNG won playing around Uzi and going with more tankier solo lanes, we would actually not be talking about the meta thing that much. We would actually be phrasing it as like, yeah, there were some teams that tried to not play the standard meta and they just got shit stomped. Like IG and Cloud9 and Vitality, like they all tried to do something that was like off meta and like skirmish a lot, but they actually got punished for it. So it's a little bit like post just result analysis, but it is crazy to think about that. Just RNG winning would have changed the whole viewpoint on everyone on regarding if defensive meta can work. So I do want to touch on it a little, like defensive meta and what we mean by that. So there's something called burden of execution. It means like how hard it is something to execute. And when the burden of execution for scaling is really low, and you can scale up to, let's say, the 45-minute point in the game or the 50-minute point in the game where you have 4 or 5 items on everyone and you're stronger, then you win by picking comps that are stronger at 40-minute, 45-minute. But the burden of execution to get to that point has just been getting harder and harder and harder. Lower vision, stronger champions with just 1 item power spike, most notably Irelia, Akali, and like ADs, they actually spike at pretty hard at 1 items now too because of Storm Ragers, and they scale gradually until they get 3 or 4 items. So just the burden of execution to get to that 40-minute, 50-minute has just gotten harder and harder this world. And yeah, like crazy to think about. RNG winning changes everything. If RNG wins, it literally just changes everything.
Yeah.
And how
same with KT. KT also could have won not doing this style. You know, they still were clearly good enough. And like, as you say, everyone would have just taken whoever the champion was and reverse engineered the reason they won. I mean, the funny thing is, this is a point that Kelsey often makes, and she's so right on it, is that even when people talk about Koreans in history of League of Legends, they're mainly just thinking of SK Telecom every year because SK Telecom so often got to the top with the same style. And so, like, for example, whenever, because she used to get mad triggered when any Western player or coach would be like, oh, we were trying to play the Korean style. And she'd always be like, what is the Korean style? Because let's face it, like, Rox Tigers and Samsung White don't play the same style as SK Telecom did. Like, these are very different squads. But I know what they mean by that. They mean the style that's winning all these championships, which was SK Telecom. And that's the thing I always gave Koma a lot of credit for, is even though he's working with different players at spots, like obviously jungle and top, he always found a way to somehow get the new player to be able to do the things that the old player did in that same spot. Like if you join the team as a top laner, like the best example for me is the guy who just won Worlds, Duke. Right? Duke, before he joined SK Telecom, was a fucking carry top laner. Like, this guy wasn't going to be like just your bitch and do whatever you want. But when he came to SK Telecom, he quickly learned the way you make it as an SK Telecom top laner is you do what they want you to do, which in this meta is play tanks and just absorb the fucking pressure and wait till we get to the late game and win on team fights. Like, I'm not going to be fucking dumpstering my lane here and getting the jungler in my lane all the time. That's just not going to happen in SK Telecom.
Yeah, I mean, well, Goma could do that because he had core players that he built around always, which were Faker and Bang. They are incredibly strong carry players and incredibly strong backline and very good team fighters. So whenever they would get to team fight phase with Faker and Bang, they would just win. So that's like the funny thing about coaching in NA versus coaching in Korea. Coaching in Korea, you can have your own system and mold your players to that system or even pick players based on that system. In NA, it's, all right, you're given Dardoch, Lorlo, Piglet, Phoenix, and Mad. Pick a team style that works for them. And like that's how it is. Like, you're given pieces, and those pieces are so important and so strong. Like, you can't try to like change them into something else while expecting short-term and even somewhat of a long-term result. Like, it's very different coaching in either region where just work with what you have, or you can try to mold the people into what you want for the future.
The key angle for me, though, the reason why I don't buy the idea that, like, you know, Korea's on the way down and like, ooh, are they in trouble for next year? It's like, first of all, if you look at the situation in Korea right now, like, they have so much of the talent that came back to Korea. Like, their talent base is fucking nuts right now. It's really strong again. Like, I know it doesn't seem like it because, unfortunately, King's Own Dragon X has a load of the talent in their team and they didn't make Worlds. So they actually this year played the role of KT the last 2 years, where it's like you have all this mad talent and then you don't go to the tournament. So yeah, unsurprisingly, if you like, try going into any other region and doing that. Go into EU and go, right, well, we're not going to take Reckless or Caps, and we're not going to take Soaz, and we're not going to take Perks, and we're not going to take Yankos. Right now, send EU to Worlds and tell me they're going to do fucking awesome. Korea was doing that and still winning the tournament. That's what's so ridiculous. So, like, when you think of if any of these talent, either in the same teams they're in now, or if they make new teams, you can make the best team in the world out of any of these players. I mean, like, the King's Own team alone has some of the, like, maddest, like, a selection of players I've ever seen. It's amazing, the lineup that they have. So either that team gets good again, or you make a team with different players from that squad in a different team, you know. Either way, it only goes uphill for me.
Yeah. So the opposite angle is like, well, now that Korea hasn't won Worlds and their Korean players are getting paid less than North American and Chinese players, and maybe even potentially European players now with EU franchising, like, why would Korean players even stay? And my answer to that is, so Korea has this nickname for StarCraft. It's called Minsok Lori, it basically means like Korea's favorite game. So like
Right.
we actually have a game called Yunnori, which is like a traditional Korean game, and that was where Minseok Nori is used, but we use it for StarCraft because it's Korea's favorite traditional game.
Sure.
And that's what League of Legends has turned into. Like when you go to like there is some competition with Overwatch in this generation, but when you go to like school in Korea, like amongst like high schoolers and middle schoolers, like after school, everyone goes to like a PC cafe together and they play League of Legends. And then you have like discussions about who's the best player in our class, like who's the best player in our school. Like League of Legends is still so massively popular in Korea where even if we lose like top 10 players, like we're just going to grow new ones. Like that's the scary thing about Korea. Like everyone's talking about Griffin. Oh, if Griffin went to Worlds, if Griffin went to Worlds. Do you know Griffin didn't even exist for a while? Like you didn't even hear Griffin until this year. So like we can lose our top tier players. That doesn't even matter. Our next generation of players will replace them and still do well, even if all our top tier players leap to NA, China, Europe, where they pay more. So I wouldn't be afraid for Korea.
And if you want another example, like not only do you get the Griffin players, just look at this guy Keane. Who the fuck was this guy last year? Nobody. I tell you that, he was a nobody. Like nobody was telling you this guy's like, it's not like, you know, like LS with all these players he talks about. There was no guy like Greg Keane's going to be the next fucking sick top laner. And then you look at him this year in the LCK, what a monster this guy was. I know fans who only watch from the West are going to be like, what are you talking about? He was bad against Cloud9. Like, first of all, he wasn't. But secondly, that was like the one time I think this year that he's looked shit. He looked amazing the rest of the year. And he was like basically, like off the top of my head, maybe he played for some like lower level team, but he was basically to me a rookie. Like he'd never been at the top level before. And you saw how quickly he adapted. So that's already been proven. New talent comes through Korea anyway. As we say, they've already gotten some talent back, so they've already got more pieces to work with. Like now you can be in a lower level team and you've got like quality players again, like Spirit are still there, you know, helping newer players come along. So I think like the scene is still very healthy in Korea. And if anything, the way that they lost Worlds, like, because like I said, it could have been a lot better. You know, Katie could have made semis, or, you know, Afrika might have beaten Cloud9 like everyone thought. It wouldn't have looked as bad if you'd had some teams in semis. If anything, the fact that Koreans, if anything, overreact to results, like when they don't win a tournament, they are like ashamed, and you know there's all those jokes that are only like half jokes, like fucking swim home, you know, like no one wants you. When people react that way, it is going to make you even more dedicated to try and get back to the top again. So actually, if anything, I think this is where Korea, like the clap back from them next year will be even crazier, if you ask me.
Yeah, like I think 2019 is going to be revenge of the LCK year, and if it is not the revenge of the LCK year, then I would be very surprised and I would be very worried for Korea because, like, yeah, I mean, it means the future of League of Legends is dying in Korea because what I'm banking on is not just older players, as we talked about, it's the newer players that are going to come in and replace some of the shittier older players or some people that's lost passion. So I think 2019 is going to be a very big year to see what the future of Korea looks like without OGN and with Riot so heavily involved and with also like them losing Worlds for the first time since season 2.
And as much as you say, you know, like, yeah, if you're an LCK player, you could think to yourself, I'll get paid more if I go elsewhere. But I've noticed, if you look at the players who did that, probably the biggest dirty secret ever, right, is that people don't know. I told this story before, that like back when they had the Samsung White team that won Worlds, that whole year, there were rumors inside the scene, like whether they win or they lose Worlds, or whether they make it or not, they'll just retire. Like this is their last year, you know, they're sick of playing with each other because some of them had like contentious relationship, you know, and it's like either, because if you remember, they were losing all the LCKs, it's like either we get it done and we fucking win, in which case let's just retire on the top anyway, or we don't win, in which case it didn't work, so what's no point playing together anymore. The reason for my money that they went to China is because that was a cool way to make it like, yeah, you know what, I'm not 100% into League anymore, but I can go elsewhere, get paid mega bucks compared to what I'm getting now, still be relevant, you know, like in China I'm going to be a star, but I don't have the same pressure on me. So I actually think that a lot of the players that went over abroad, it's mainly like the first criteria is they didn't have a sick option in Korea. Like if they could have played for SK Telecom in Korea, some of them would have stayed. If they wanted to be a world champion, some of them would have stayed. Because the best way to win is clearly be on an all-Korean team. I think usually the players that go abroad, they have some other reason. It's not just money. Money can be a pretty good one, like if you want to go to China. But you know, some of the players who went to the NALCS, I know for a fact some of them did it because it's like, I want to be a star player. Or you know what, I think my best years are behind me. This is a way to reinvent myself and still be relevant. You know, maybe I could still get to Worlds. Wouldn't that be cool? I could come through the NLCS or EULCS. But I don't think those players generally like what makes Rookie unique for me is that he went to China, and if anything, looks like he got more motivated and really did put in the hours, like grinding to try and become a world champion. And obviously, it might not have ever happened for him. For a long time, he looked like he was stuck in kind of like a prison in that team where he was never going to be able to win even LPL, you know. So like I wouldn't worry too much about like top level talents going abroad. I already saw this, that ESPN did an article where because Faker's contract ends on November 18th, they were speculating like, you know, where does he go? And because it's ESPN and it's my boy Theon, who, let's face it, does pander like a motherfucker to NA fans, obviously he's already suggesting like 100 Thieves and fucking Western teams. Like, listen, homie, there's two options here. One, Faker stays in Korea, in which case he will 100% be re-signing with SK Telecom. Or two, he just wants money, in which case he'll be on like EDG or fucking Vici Gaming. You know, he'll just go for the biggest money. Those are the only two realistic options.
And I actually have
Faker. Like, there's no universe. Story. There's no universe where he's joining 100 Thieves or fucking Echo Fox. Like, that ain't ever happening. Like, I know why you pander, because it's a clever angle to get fans in, but it's not realistic. Like, let's be real. Come on.
Okay, how realistic do you think TL Faker is?
I don't think very realistic. Because here's the thing. Someone like Faker does really want to win the Worlds again. That's his ultimate goal. So, like, no matter how much they pay you, it's just not as likely playing for TL as any Korean team, is it?
Yeah. So,
I could believe, by the way, Team Liquid would make the offer. That part.
So years ago, when I was exiting Team Liquid, I was still helping them with offseason. And one thing that TL wanted to do as soon as they got the investment was they wanted to make a list of who would be the best mid laners for their team. And number one was Faker and number two was Bjerg. And then I was sitting there thinking, and like I actually said it to Steve. I'm like, Steve, this is ridiculous. Like, Andy would never give us Bjergsen and they would never give us Faker. And Steve's reasoning, which I do understand the reasoning, is it doesn't matter if there is almost no chance, that is still somewhat of a chance. We should just go down the list.
Yes.
So he reached out to Andy. Of course, Andy said no. And then he wanted me to help him reach out to SKT. So I helped them a little, and then I had found them an email where they could, but I wasn't all that into like helping them with it because I thought it would be ridiculous. And apparently like they got an email back saying no, but you can have like Scout or Sky instead.
Yeah.
And I can tell you like the SKT weren't considering it for a second. Like they would never let go of Faker. And even this year, like they're not gonna let go of Faker. Like SKT is a ginormous company. It's one of the biggest companies in Korea, and Faker and the SKT, like the esport brand, brings them so much advertisement value. And for them, it's not about like leaving an esport legacy. I guess somewhat it is, because SKT1 as the esport brand has been like a history of success, but it's more so about advertisement, and there's no better advertisement than Faker. They'll match any kind of number that TL can put up, or any company, like long as it's in like realm of possibility, like they'll match any kind of number, because Faker is a ginormous advertisement for SKT. Like SKT and Faker like just go together so well. Like you can't think of one without the other.
Oh, and there's the other angle as well, which is like, let's be real, they wouldn't even have to match it. As long as they get vaguely within the same ballpark, that's the problem. If you're Faker, you're not really thinking, I get this much more. You're thinking, I have to risk leaving, like uprooting myself, go to another country, play with non-Koreans. All my fans initially are going to think I've betrayed them. All that just for like, let's say in their mind, it's 100,000 more a year. Like that sounds great if you're you or I, like a fan, just thinking, 100,000 more? It's like, for Faker, that isn't worth it, mate. Like if anything, think about like the LeBron storyline at the Cavaliers, right? For Faker now, he's already won all the championships. Like this guy can retire tomorrow and probably no one ever matches like accomplishments. But here's the thing, if he could win even one more LCK title when they're shit now, if he could take them to Worlds again and give them a chance, he only becomes even more legendary. He doesn't even have to do it. He doesn't have to actually win. If he can just get them back from where now everyone looks at them now and is like, dude, they might have two good players. It's like Faker and Bang, that's it. Like in the position they're in now, they have no chance to win. So if he can ever get them back, he just adds like another chapter that'll be so satisfying for him, for the org that's stuck with him. Like, unfortunately, there's too many like narratives basically go against the idea that Faker would leave. Like, leaving's a very mercenary move. Like if you were gonna leave, should probably have left 3 years ago, you know, like at the original Korean Exodus, get your max value. At that point, you know, you've only played for them for a couple of years. You'd even be coming off a bad year if you remember 2014. You could even excuse it like, well, you know, I did my time, now I'm on a different tier. at this point, you also have kind of bought in, if you're Faker, to the idea of like Faker and SK Telecom is a thing. Like, we're just going to be here the whole time. Like, the only angle I could see in which you might even consider it is, say they fired Korma or something. Yeah. Then maybe you could use that angle of like, well, he was my coach, There's another factor. Why are you going to leave that guy? Like, it's one of the reasons why I think a lot of teams, even in sports, don't make drastic changes. Is because if you can remember winning championships with a certain guy, even if he's playing bad now, part of you thinks, oh, he could get it back, I remember how good he used to be. Like, I still believe in him. Like, you'll even give them an extra chance. So I don't think, sadly, even though if it was me, I would tell Faker today, leave me. That team looks terrible. The team they put around you was a disgrace. Like, just say thanks for the great years. Like, go get a good deal. I'd personally tell him to stay in Korea. Like, I wouldn't tell him to go to join fucking China or something. But I can totally understand why in his mind, he's not thinking that way. Like, he's thinking with a very different perspective.
Yeah, and it's so hard to convince players like Faker with money. So players like Faker were from an extremely young age where they're offered a lot of money. They don't actually even get to touch that money. What happens is they give all their money to their parents, and their parents gives them allowance. Like, here, you can have $1,000 a month, and then Faker just spends the allowance. So for him, I don't think he even really grasps money, and like he probably couldn't tell you even his exact salary, like, because all of it goes to his parents, and his parents gives him an allowance. So yeah, money is not the number one thing for Faker. He's shown that with his decisions in the past, and also young Korean players that's been famous ever since they were young don't really get a good grasp on money due to their parents managing their money.
Plus, as a final note on the whole Korea thing, for people who didn't watch LCK, Korea, if anything, wasn't even making the most use of all their talent. I know teams like Kingzone and KT have super stacked rosters that are really amazing, but there was talent out there. Obvious example, like Teddy on Jin Air. I think some of the players on like Rocks Tigers were decent. Like, they have some talent out there that was in lower squads that were never going to be winning LCK. That if you put them in bigger squads, that you transfer Teddy to fucking SK Telecom tomorrow, we're cooking with gas now. Now we can start building a world-class team again. Like, there are players out there that can be gotten. And then also, the angle you can never discount. There's a guy right now, none of us know, who's on Korean solo queue. If you put him in the right pro team, will become one of the best players in the world. Like, you can't say that about any other region, sadly. It's just rarely the case, So, right, moving on from that then. Now that the general off-season is beginning around the world, we can go through the Western regions as well. There's angles we can go with that. But first of all, we're going to introduce a concept, which isn't going to mean anything right now necessarily. But we're going to use it as a theme for future episodes. If everyone remembers, on Summon and Insight, we had a couple of times where, to add a bit of spice, if you really predict something crazy that people don't think can happen, then you make what we used to call a Lord bet. Because the idea is, like, to make it ultimately humiliating to the person who loses, they have to call the winner Lord, and then, like, be like deferential to them in some way on that particular issue. Whether they win because they were like had the right reasons, just whether they win. So if people can remember, a famous example was Loco predicted that TSM would win. I think it was that you said they'd win LCS,
2014,
right?
Yeah, 2014 summer that they would win LCS.
Yes, and this is obviously at the time when there was a lot of upheaval in TSM, and you could make a case for or against it. It was actually not like I'm actually giving you a favour here, mate. Everyone else now is going to think, well, of course they win. They always win in LCS. Actually, at that point in time, a lot of people thought they'd been overtaken by Cloud9, on these teams. So it was actually a legit bet on both sides. And since you won that, obviously we called you a Lord. So we got an angle like that. Like,
but I wasn't even on the show after because we started fighting.
Whatever. It happened. I still said it on Twitter, mate. I kept my end of the bet.
Okay, sure.
It's true. I did. I kept my end of the bet.
Right.
Now, here's the thing. We're going to do an angle on that, which is like, rather than just instantly the person wins and becomes a Lord, we're going to have what we're going to call Lord tokens. And the angle here is like, once you build up a certain amount of Lord tokens, then yeah, the other guy has to like do some sort of forfeit. So they have to say something on Twitter or on the show or make a video. And the idea is we'll bet a certain number of tokens against each other. So if I win 20 Lord tokens from Loco this week, next week, maybe he can win some back if he has his own crazy bet. He can draw me in. It's just a fun angle we're going to put on the show. And obviously it'd be great if we can include guests with it. So I'm just laying that out there now so people know it's a concept as we go forwards in the show. So let's start here, Loco. We've done a bit about Korea, talked a bit about the meta, but what people really want to know is EU and NA. They want to know if things are going to change there. So if we start with EU, because the key thing with EU is it's getting franchising finally. Like finally, everyone in theory is going to be on an even playing field. There's also the angle, which I think is a very interesting one that a lot of people are missing, which is because to be an EU franchising like NALCS, you have to put a lot of money in. It's millions and millions. It means that in theory, you shouldn't have it like in the past, where by default, people who were Europeans who wanted to make money just went to NA. Like in theory, if you are a G2 fanatic and you've got the investment, you could actually pay this guy a salary where, I mean, G2 apparently already did this with Perks. That's why he didn't go to NA. He really was on money where it's like, again, you can think about staying. You don't have to go for the big check. So that alone is going to be a game changer, surely.
So, oh man, I wonder if I can actually say this, but I want to leak some stuff. So why not?
Come on.
So way long ago, I used to, there was an agency that repped me. They don't exist anymore. Right. And this was done by like the former agent, Paris Hilton. He ran it and he repped me. He repped Perks. He repped a lot of people, but the important person
was he telling you to make some sort of like a camcorder video in a hotel room with someone? He's like, listen, we'll blow it back up again, Loco. You can get famous, baby. I've done this before. Just follow my script. You'll become the most famous person in esports.
No, but he did tell me, I see that you party in K-Town a lot. You should party in Hollywood, and I'll tell you which clubs you should party at.
That's a good line. That's a pretty good line.
And you can, what is it? You might get on blah 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 on TMZ or someone. Yeah. I was like, okay, I'm down. We ended up going to Hollywood, and we just always partied in K-Town. But anyways, he told me that long term, a lot of NA players, including Perks, or a lot of EU players, including Perks, had their eyes on NA. So I know a lot of people will say, oh, this player will never move. This player will never move. EU forever. Like there's always an amount of money that will move people, and obviously, like G2 knew that too, or they wouldn't have paid Perks that much.
Yes.
If honestly Perks was just, I bleed EU, I will stay in EU no matter what. Why does Ocelot and G2 have to pay him so much? If he's gonna stay in EU no matter what, like why do they have to pay him so much? Like it's not wrong for EU players. Like your career is gonna be 5 years, 6 years, 7 years. If it's really long, make all the money you can. Like there's no shame in moving to NA.
Sure. No, because here's the thing, right, is I would describe it like this. Let's say, right, okay, so Perks is a good example because clearly he does love G2 and he's had a lot of success there. So he has lots of reasons to stay in G2, right? But this is the way your mindset works. Someone comes and offers you, let's just say 1.5 times what you're currently getting. You go, I don't want to be rude, so I'll think about it, but come on, 1.5 times, that's not enough to leave. I've got all these great reasons to stay. And then they say 2 times and you go, well, 2 times is getting, I've got to at least think about this one now. At the end you go, but you know what? You talk to yourself, I'm not just in this for the money, like money's good, but I want to win as well, and G2 promises they'll build a squad 3 times more. But what reason would I have to stay? Like, I mean, sure, yeah, we did win championships, but those were old lineups. We've got new players now. Yeah, we had great times, but times come and go. 4 times more, right? I don't even really like Europe that much. 5 times. What? You know what? I've always wanted to try something new in my career. A new chapter. Yeah. It's like that's the way your mentality changes. The difference is in the Faker example we gave. He already was getting paid enough by SK Telecom. No one could ever get to the real level. Like if you were really nuts, like Wag Sakong guy, who's like the owner of IG, if he'd have really come to Faker and was like, listen, I just don't even care about money. I'll give you 10 million a year. I guarantee Faker then would be like, you know what? Actually, I need to expand esports around the world and be an ambassador for Korean esports in China. And this is going to be a really great thing. And I've had a great time. Yeah, there is a number. Everyone
you can always change your angle. You can always change your angle.
Exactly. It's like you fit once it gets high enough, you fit the excuse to fit the reason, not the other way around.
Oh man, more off-season stories from last year when I was doing off-season work for Golden Guardians. Like, there's players I talked to that were literally tweeting stuff like, "I would never leave EU. Like, fucking dirty NA money will never change me." Like a week after we were done discussing, and they wouldn't be potentially talking to us if they had if they didn't want to come at all. Like, oh my god. The thing is, what happens is they hear the amount that other people are making, and they expect to make the same amount, and when they don't get offered the same amount, they become salty, and they're like, Power of Evil, Jensen, all these people that went to NA, you guys don't really want to get better. If you really were serious about League of Legends, you would stay in Europe. Europe forever, baby. I will never go to NA. As you were fucking talking to NA teams 2 to 3 weeks ago. Sure, dude, sure.
Sure. There's also the other angle as well, that especially in a game like League, where your chances to actually get to Worlds and the LCS final are quite limited because there's only 2 LCS finals a year, there's only 1 Worlds. You actually can't guarantee, unless you have some team given to you. okay, say, like, I mean, funnily enough, this team didn't make it to Worlds, so I use them as the example. If you think of 2017 KT Rolster, right, that's a squad where if you're any of those players and they tell you, by the way, if you join KT, we're going to give you fucking Mata and Smeb and Scott, like, yeah, you do just join that because that feels like a guarantee that you can make, you know, Worlds, you can potentially win LCK. Most LCS teams aren't like that. Like, one of the sad things about LCS is you normally can't actually stack star players on our lineup, so you never really know how good the team's going to be. The difference is you do know how much your contract says you're getting paid. Like, if you, like, here's the thing, okay, I'm giving this as an example. I'm not saying this is why Febiven did it, but personally, when I saw the Clutch Gaming lineup that Febiven joined, I didn't think they had any chance to win LCS. I was like, there's no way this team's winning. But if I'm Febiven and this is your time to finally cash in from all those good years in EU, and I'll make up a number. Let's say they're going to give you $250,000 salary this year. Well, worst case scenario, first of all, you can mindfuck yourself into believing, hey, maybe this team could do something. Hey, you know, maybe the coach should be good. But you know, one thing you do know is at the end of the year, you have 250K in your bank account. That's a pretty good reason to go to that team beyond anything else. So like, that's actually something people will underrate. It's one of the reasons why in traditional sports, NFL's a great example of this. If someone wins the championship, the reason why it's so hard to repeat is oftentimes all your players won't stay because they know this is their chance to get a payday.
Yeah.
Like, they might be the 11th best player, but if they sign with someone else, the team signing them is like, hey, this guy's a champion.
You're going to have to overpay.
That's the year you can get more money. And likewise, it doesn't make sense for the team to keep you because they would have to pay more than they did last year just to have the same squad. So that's why I expect in League, you have seen this happen and it will continue to happen. But like I said, the offset here is this might be the first year where EU can actually offer legit comparable salaries for most of the top talent. So I think if you are the big teams, you can retain all your players if you want, if you're willing to invest that much, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, NA is able to offer insane salary due to the investment and the investors knowing we're going to lose money, but we're going to go up in valuation. We're going to lose liquid money to go up in valuation. So now you can do the same. They can lose liquid money to go up in valuation and pray for the future. Like, I think Fnatic is going to be able to keep all their players that they want. They're going to make a decision between Soaz and Bwipo. I think that's going to happen for sure.
They have to do that, I think. Yeah. It's clear that Soaz isn't happy, so you got to make a choice.
I think they're going to pick Bwipo. Who do you think?
Oh, it's almost certain, mate. Like, if you look at the history of Fnatic, if you remember this is an angle people forget, but when they initially got Broxah at the beginning of, I think it was 2017, the beginning of 2017, they actually, at the time, or was it 2016? I think it was 2017. When they got Broxah, they initially had Amazing, the guy who was in Vitality, and Schalke, rather, I think is the one that he was in. Am I thinking that right? Is it Vitality or Schalke he was in?
Amazing. He was on Mysterious Monkey.
And then after that, was it Vitality? Why am I blanking on this one? No, obviously he was on Schalke. Sorry, I'm thinking of Gilius on Vitality, right? Okay, so when they had him as a player, the reason why Amazing got angry and actually left the team is because he got the vibe from them of like, okay, we want you because you're a veteran, but your job really is sort of train up your understudy who's Broxah, and one day he will replace you and then you'll be gone and we'll just have Broxah. There's the same thing clearly with Soaz and Bwipo. And so even if right now they let you get playing time, like, you know, you play this time and he gets this game off if he's tilted, you know the way the direction is pointing there. And the direction is like, eventually, clearly they want to switch to the young guy who they think has 5 years in him. Whereas like, no matter how good you think Soaz is, in your brain, you always think, you never know if next year he decides to hang it up. You know, he's played long enough, he could do it. So as a result, it also does, even though I personally prefer Soaz over Bwipo, it just doesn't make business sense to keep Soaz in this case, you know. I mean, all you need to know is the New England Patriots legitimately were trying to replace Tom Brady the last couple of years. They were, because the same reason. All you know, he could have injured next year, he could just retire next year. So you don't want to like hit your whole franchise's history coming up on him when you might have already seen his best years. So I agree with you. Logically, you pick Bwipo and you just hope it's the right decision.
Yeah, I mean, Soaz and Tom Brady are an exception, and you're expecting them to do the unexpected every year. Like Soaz being good
it's
next
more likely
year,
they should drop off eventually.
Yeah. So yeah, you're betting against Father Time, which is not a good bet to make.
Okay. What do you think of the franchising angle, though? Because if you notice, just like in NA, we had a bunch of teams that were European mainstays who didn't get into franchising. We had H2K, we had Unicorns Love. These are teams that not only have been like to the finals, etc. They've been long stays. They've been in EU's LCS for 3-4 years. You had teams where, I mean, probably the funniest version was Giants. because Giants have never had a good team, but what they were always good at is either winning the promotion match or getting relegating someone else and getting back into LCS. So I always kind of respected that. They had their own little hustle, their own little grind, but obviously these teams were never going to be in EU franchising. Like, it just wasn't realistic.
I mean, Unicorns of Love, like, they're poorer than almost any team out there, so they were never going to make it, and you can't make it on fan support alone.
Of course.
Like, if you're going to blame someone for Unicorns of Love not making it in, blame Unicorns of Love for not going out and finding investment and finding the right partners where it is favorable for Riot to include them in the EU franchise. Like, sure. Riot made a business decision. Like, you can't include people because fans love them, so let's just have this team in. That's a ridiculous statement, and ridiculous by EU fans to like rage at Riot for not including Unicorns of Love. As for H2K, they've been bad boys, and when you've been a bad boy for many years, Riot's not happy. They've been bad boys. I do think they're a decent org. They invested a lot into esports. They invested a lot into League of Legends, and they constantly put the money in. It's just, they definitely rubbed Riot wrongly a lot of times, in my opinion, and that's why they didn't get in.
Sure.
I mean, we got a lot of the good, like the old school orgs in from Jacob Wolf's report, like SK Gaming back in. I mean, Fnatic, obviously. Misfits, obviously. Shout out to Jacob Cute and Jimmy Kuhn, who were the original investors on Goldcoin United. I mean, now you guys are in franchising. Congrats.
Which team are they with?
Misfits.
Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah.
They just came in as investors.
So after Goldcoin United didn't make it in, I guess I can talk about it somewhat. So during GCU, when we were prepping for franchising, Misfits came in and like helped, like we combined their application, but Riot wasn't going to let any of the EU LCS orgs in, because if they let a EU LCS org in, then they're killing EU LCS. So of course they didn't let Fnatic, G2, or Misfits in when NA franchising was happening, and they let them in during EU franchising. I mean, congrats to Jimmy and Jake. I mean, I feel like a lot of the good orgs got in. How do you feel about like the 10 teams that got in?
Let me actually check if I can see what the actual list of all the teams that are in is.
Jacob Wolf, EU LCS franchising. I have to go back and double check the list also.
We have to see what the most recent post was.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, actually, there's even a Liquipedia reference for it. That's weird. Why the fuck would Liquipedia be on there? Liquipedia has League of Legends. Oh, well, you learn something new every day. Let's have a look what the teams were. Oh, it's still rumored, but...
it's rumored, but Jacob Wolf, at this point, like his track record has been so good where I would consider it 99% sure.
One of them obviously is Astralis, who's the team who has a very good Counter-Strike team at the moment. And the key thing with them is, like, not only is the company behind that being able to raise a lot of money, like they're even running tournaments called Brass Pro Series, but as well, that is a team which has gotten the government to give them like $1 million a year or something.
Wow.
Because the idea is, it's like promoting Danish culture through esports or whatever. So that alone is going to be very appealing if someone hears that who's like Riot and they want you to get involved. The Movistar Riders one might surprise people, but within the like Spanish region or whatever it's called, that is considered like a big squad. I would assume that also means, if you look at some of their sponsors, that they've been able to get like a big deal, which means that they have the investment to go forwards. So that's one where the name doesn't sound as sexy because it doesn't have the same history, but it's a pretty big one. Rogue's another one that will surprise people, because Rogue is a team where I forget what game they come from originally, maybe like Call of Duty or something, but I know that like even in CS where they don't have a very good team, I know they pay them a lot of money. North, also another Danish one. They're actually a team that has a pretty good Counter-Strike team, but they're famous for being backed by, I think it's FC Copenhagen, which is like the #1 Danish soccer team, and they even have like a practice room inside the stadium of the football team where they can look out the windows and like see the match or some crazy shit like that. And then you've got SK Gaming, like you say, very old school brand, but one that in recent years has been able to take on a lot of investment. That's actually how in CSGO they went from having like almost nothing in CSGO to having that Brazilian team that up until recently was very, very good and like won a major, etc. That's because they took on investment to do that. Like they got the investment and then used that money to buy that team. So another team I could believe, especially if you know about the history of European esports, where a number of people who used to work for or own SK are involved with like ESL. So they have like a lot of connections in the esports industry. In fact, one of the guys as well who's involved with G2, Jens Hilger, was I think in some sense involved with ESL and then perhaps connected connected with SK. So basically, if you know like the industry of esports, most of these names aren't surprises. Actually, they make a lot of sense. Even though I agree, if you're a League fan, you're going to think SK Gaming, like they haven't been in for years, and they were bad, or who the fuck's Movistar Riders? Like that isn't what franchises is about, guys. Basically, think of franchising as like you're resetting everything. Everyone starts at zero, and now the only thing that gets you into franchising should be, do you have the like business acumen? Like you have the investment, a good business plan, and you seem like you're heading in the right direction. If they think your company is going to tank in a year, they shouldn't they shouldn't let you in, because remember, franchising is like we're all in this together.
Yeah,
like, it's like think of it like wrestling, WWE. So even though in theory in WWE they're fighting each other, the last thing they want in WWE is for the other guy to get injured. Like our goal is to make a great match that everyone watches and the WWE succeeds. Like that's where we all succeed. So franchising is like that. We're all going to split the profits. We're all going to get money through the sponsors Riot brings in. You all have to basically kind of agree that the other people deserve to be there. If there's too many people where it's like 8 of the other people like, fuck these guys, like I don't believe they're not going to get in, sadly. And we can never know that outside entirely what the circumstances were. So it's hard to gauge who's right and who's wrong on those ones, I think.
What do you think franchising is going to do for Europe? Veteran, who's, I would say, is a bigger EU expert than either of us, maybe not bigger than you, we're very negative about franchising. Do you think that was naive? Do you think EU franchising is going to make overall EU better?
Well, here's the thing. I know one of the reasons that he gave, which is like he actually gave this on the episode, is one I agree with, which is that, I mean, it's almost inarguable that it makes the competition of the league worse, because what it means is, say someone has a team. So I'll give you some examples in NALCS. So in the first split, Golden Guardians, absolutely dreadful team. In the second split, CLG, fucking whack team that was never going to go anywhere. These teams in a relegation system, they might get knocked out. You might be able to just get rid of these guys and get someone better in. And every year in EU, we have a team who comes through promotions who very quickly becomes a top team. You had the Splice team with all those Danish guys. They went to Worlds. You have obviously more recently, let me think, who would you pick as a recent example? Misfits, not a couple of years ago, did it, Like you've had a bunch of teams that came from promotion and relegation. Now, yeah, you could have picked these players up individually, but you would never get that exact squad come through. I mean, obviously in LCK, you have Griffin. There would be no Griffin if it had been franchised. They wouldn't be able to get in. They'd have to sign the players separately. So the downside of franchising is it makes like short-term upheaval like that can't happen. And if you look at Europe especially, Europe was very famous for like talented players who were on no salary being able to beat out pros and sometimes come in the league and make a difference. So I agree with them on that one. It's just that in the future, I also agree with the other side of it, which is that if you have enough time, like let's say you have 5 years and you build up all the infrastructure and training and you have an amazing academy system, you could offset most of the downsides of that and you'd only experience the benefits of franchising. It's just, I agree with them. In the short term, it's not as good in my opinion.
Okay.
And especially, by the way, in Europe, there wasn't as much of a history of like getting the washed up NA pro to just play for your like team that's going to get relegated and save them. That usually you got relegated in Europe if you were that bad. Like there weren't as many like bring in fucking, I don't know, whoever it is just to play like the last 5 games. Like, that doesn't happen really. So Europe was more about how good you are. It wasn't really about the name value as much.
Okay. Super big question. I'll put my 2 cents in also. I think everyone is very curious about this. Do you think Zben and Meti, more specifically Zben, moves back to Europe to join Astralis? It's something a lot of people have been talking about. I will say, I will give a preface. I actually have no information from TSM side, and if I did, I wouldn't speak on it because that would be rude. I actually have 0 information. What do you think?
Yeah, I also don't have any inside information on this, so I'm just speculating entirely. But here's the key thing for me, is that I actually suspect that the only reason he would move back is to join either Astralis or North, these teams with this strong Danish connection. And the angle there would have to be, first of all, you're definitely going to have money comparable to what he has in TSM. That's step one. But if you do that, now, like I was saying with Faker, where you're weighing up all the reasons, well, the idea of representing Denmark and representing a Danish org and having like all this like basically like blowing up your profile even more in like a really righteous man. Like obviously everyone wants to be a Danish player on the Danish team that goes to finals worlds. That'd be ultra, that's your dream, isn't it? Like in that scenario. The thing is, in that scenario, I think you could maybe lure someone like that back. The bigger issue is how much he actually believes in TSM. Like, I know in interviews, players are always going to say all this shit. No, we're all working to get better. And, I believe in my teammates and the vision that TSM has. Like, if he actually does believe in that, there's a good reason to stay with TSM, which is you're still there with fucking Bjergsen and you've got Mithy with you still. And you've been promised they'll get a new jungler or they've got a new coach. There's a lot of reasons to stay. But I agree with you. That angle of like, get paid similar money, be on a really big EU team and represent Denmark and have like all that cool shit where like listen, no matter, okay, so everyone might have seen during Worlds, Caps' dad was there, right? And he was cheering on his son, but you could tell Caps' dad didn't really understand what was going on a lot of the time. Like he just knew that his son's playing and he's playing for Fnatic and he hopes they win. If Caps' dad knows Caps is playing for like the best Danish team and the fucking Danish prime minister's tweeting at like the team, hey, good luck in Worlds, that's going to mean something to Caps' dad and Caps' family and everyone around him. So I actually think that that's actually not a bad reason to play for one of those teams and go back to EU. I do think though, personally, if I had to bet, I'd say he just stays with TSM. Like, I think he waits another year and sees how it goes this year because there still are a lot of good pieces there. You could still definitely turn it around.
So playing detective, I think Astralis didn't like randomly get in. Like to do a franchising and like to get in, like you have to prep for a very long time, at least half a year at the shortest. So half a year ago when Astralis is like planning to get in and they, from rumors, they involved Officio, right? I think they would have dropped the message to Zeben and Zeben wouldn't be so gung-ho about being on TSM. Like I saw him at TwitchCon with TSM. He still streams under the brand of TSM. It seems like he's very still connected to the TSM brand up to this point. And if he was going to leave for Astralis, I think he would have made that decision already and he would be disassociating himself with TSM. So with all like every like action he's shown, I think he's still staying on TSM. I think it would have been a completely different thing if the Astralis could make a legitimate offer like this off season and like before like he like I guess doubled down on TSM. But I think the decision has already been made that he's staying.
I'll also add another reason, and this might sound to someone else like no way players think about this. They do. Another reason I think Sven wouldn't want to leave now is because if you leave now, people will always be able to say, you couldn't cut it in the NALCS. Like, you fucking had to go back to Europe to find success again. People like him who are really good players and have already done a lot in their career love challenges. And they love a very specific challenge. So in this particular case, the notion is like, can you make TSM succeed? And the fact that you haven't been good now makes it even more appealing to try and do it next year and make everyone like, prove all the doubters wrong, show everyone they were full of shit. Like you can make it anywhere. Like, bearing in mind, it's not like you're in a bad spot. Like, it's like in the Febiven example I gave, I could understand if Febiven went back because Clutch doesn't look like they're going to get players that'll be good enough. They don't look like they will win. If the NLCS looks like TSM could be good and Reginald tells Sven, like, listen, don't worry, I'll get you the jungler you need. This new coach is going to be good. Then you even feel like, hey, I've got all the pieces to make what I want to happen and meet my challenge. So I think that's a good reason to stay. Like, I think you can always go back a year from now and join the EU LCS. You can wait another year. There's no reason like you have to do it now. So why not see it out? Why not try and like give it a full try at TSM? And then if you fail, then right, fuck it at that point in time. Do whatever you want.
Yeah, if he won this year and he did successful and like they made it to Worlds and everything, I think it would be a completely different story.
It's a pretty sick story, yeah. Because what's cool about stories like that is you build in your failures to why the success is sweeter. I think that's the ultimate way to have your career be, in my opinion. That's why I actually hate it when players are a bit too mercenary and it's like every year they're willing to go to another team. It's like, that's cool in a way, but you've got to build a narrative as well. You want to make your legacy a really cool one.
Yeah. Do you think so? A lot of EU players started tweeting about their free agency or like that they're available to be able to talk to. Do you think any of them will leave? I think most importantly, like Alfari and Maxor from Misfits are like the big ones that started talking about it. Fnatic, none of the Fnatic players have. Oh yeah, let's talk about the two Misfits players, Alfari and Maxor and Soaz. Do you think any of those three go to NA?
That's a tough question because I'll tell you right now, Loco. Like, bearing in mind, when we had that TSM episode where I said, in the past they should have tried to recruit Xmithy or fucking Meteos. These are the sorts of players I would try and recruit as jungler. Now, you're right. Like, they obviously didn't go after Xmithy hard enough because they had a lot of chances to with him. But in terms of Meteos, okay, yeah, maybe they thought his personality wouldn't fit the brand. If I was TSM right now, like, and I realize you're in a world where you have to kick someone to get an import because you've got the two import players. But if you really are considering changing out a Mithy or something like that, someone like Maxlaw would be a great addition to your team, because this is someone who apparently gives a lot of comms as a jungler, has his own like he's one of those people where he can explain why he did everything, which is a really, really good sign for a jungler, you know, like even if something didn't work out, they can explain, like, here was my thought process, you know, I was waiting for this timing to go here. Like, you feel a lot more comfortable with a guy like that. And he can really play around the lanes. He can play around his team in a very strong manner. If I was TSM, that's the sort of player I'd have on my shortlist, and I'd be going ham trying to get them, because like when you already have like the power pieces in the lanes, that's the guy who can activate your team and take it to the next level. So maybe he's a possibility. Plus, I'd go ahead and guess, I doubt he got paid megabucks in Misfits. Like you're saying, recently they got the investment, etc. But I doubt when you look at when they came into LCS, if he was getting paid very much. He probably has like just enjoyed the successes. And also, if you look at where Misfits as a team is right now, they didn't have a very good year. Like, realistically, they weren't contending for the title. You know, they hoped they would. They had periods where they looked decent, but a lot of the moves they made, if anything, ended up being like a mild downgrade, and they didn't end up being as good a team. So I think he's at least going to be someone who's tempted if you give him a good offer. Soaz one is a tough one, because I do feel like for Soaz, he should leave. Like, I don't think they will ever give him like the full respect he deserves in Fnatic. They're clearly setting up for Bwipo. I do think it was exaggerated by Worlds being so heavily around carries. I think if it had been more like the old meta, they'd used them half and half, you know, it would have got more playing time. But after how that went, like, it's like I told you on one of our other shows, I think the person who got fucked the most by Worlds was Soaz. Because on the one hand, he couldn't publicly be like, this sucks, because his team's doing awesome, but the last thing you want is the team to do awesome and you're not even get to play the games. That's the worst possible scenario to be in. You know, even if they suck, like, it's actually better, believe it or not, to be double lift on Team Liquid, where the team was bad, but at least you got to look good. That's better than being Soaz not playing while the team wins all the games without you. That fucking sucks. So if I'm him, I would leave. And the question is there a European team willing to commit heavily? Because like we're saying, even though I do think he could play a few more years, like he's shown an amazing ability to withstand like toil of time, you know, he doesn't seem to get burned out. At the same time, he probably doesn't have 5 years left in him. Like, realistically, he's got a couple. So if I'm him, I either go for like big money offer, just take a lot of money, go to an NA team if you want for that, or it's got to be a championship contender. Like, if it's in Europe, it's got to be someone like, it's got to be like Misfits or somebody who you know, could put the pieces around you to be a top team. And if you go to NA, I'm just going to say it outright, it's got to be like Team Liquid. It's got to be some big team where I'm not just going for I'm going for money and a chance to win.
Well, so how roster building kind of works in esports is you pay really big money for your first piece. So you pay really big money for like a Aframu or like a Double Lift or like a Bjergsen. And then you tell the next players that you're getting, hey, we got a Bjergsen on our team. You should come join our team. We have a Bjergsen. Well, so we'll pay you like an okay amount, but you have to pay a lot for that one player to get them to join. And I think a lot of the newer orgs in EU franchising, like SK Gaming, Movie Stars, North, Astralis, that don't have any players to work with, one thing they can do is spend big money on SOADs and start off their roster building by, hey, we have SOADs. Who else wants to join us? Like, we're serious about winning. So I think he'll have a lot of opportunities in Europe. There's like 4 or 5 teams.
By the way, that in itself is a great angle to go with if you're one of the newer teams with a lot of money. Because, again, like some of the players we've mentioned before, Soaz is a proven winner. I mean, he's one of the only common threads with all the teams he's been on. Like, yeah, initially it looked like him and Expeke. Well, you know what? He left Expeke behind. He's still doing fucking amazing. Like, this guy, success just follows him around. And more importantly, he is so famous now as like a clutch player in LCS playoffs that, like, if you have him, there are people probably would join your team just thinking, right, this is my chance to go deep in playoffs, my chance to go to Worlds. Like, that's a very appealing piece even on that front. I'm with you on that one.
I wonder how much pull Soaz has as like a person, though. He seems like pretty, I wouldn't say reclusive, but he keeps to himself from what I saw, and it doesn't seem like he's like an overly bubbly guy. Like, there are certain players like that talks to everyone and that like always knows who's doing what. Soaz doesn't seem like that type of person. So
no, the thing is, as a person, like as you're saying, he's a bit more withdrawn. Like, he's the sort of person where I can respect this mentality, actually. It's like a professional attitude. It's like, listen, me and you don't have to like each other, but you do your job, I'll do my job. We win together. We're teammates. That's cool. You know, within that, maybe a couple of us might be friends if we get along naturally. But otherwise, if we're not friendly, if it doesn't work, don't worry about it. You just do your job. I'll do my job. That's all we need to do, which it can be very good for a team. But I agree, within a team, you're going to need at least 1 or 2 people who have kind of like the people person mentality, you know. But the key thing with Soaz is you don't need him to be. Like, he can, especially, by the way, his personality actually fits perfectly for a top lane. Think about how many top laners have just been screwed over by the meta. Like, their teams just tell them, play this shit champion. No, but I could play this amazing carry. Nah, but we're not going to let you do that. Like, you know, if anything, the mentality that he has of like, I'm just going to do my job is exactly what you want in a top laner. Like, that's why a lot of my favorite top laners are like that. Odoamne, Soaz, they're guys where they can take a lot of shit and still find a way mentally to deal with it. So if they're not the most bubbly guy, I can deal with that. The bubbly guy for me needs to be like the star mid laner who's getting all the resources, who gets all the praise from the fans. Fucking fangirls are just lining up outside his room with knee pads on after the game. Like, that guy better be lovely. He better be really nice to the top laner. He better tell the top laner, you know what, mate? I really appreciate what you did for me in this game playing fucking Cho'Gath. Thanks a million. You're the man. Anyway, I've got to go now because fucking Brittany and fucking Sparkle Shoes here want to talk to me about how big the future's going to be for me in this game. You know, like, that's the angle I'm going with there. Like, there's certain people need to be the people person.
Oh my God, Thorin.
Not mentioning any names, but we all know who I might be referring to.
Okay,
people in this scene. Yes, moving on.
Anyways, moving on to overseas, NA franchising. How do you think franchising was for NA in its first year?
One thing I think everyone should have learned from franchising in year one is what a stupid idea it was to blow up every single roster. Like, here's a concept I'm going to give you, right? It's a concept that I got from a guy who I do a show with in Overwatch. His name is Yiska. And the reason why he's a very interesting guy is he's not a famous pro player or coach. He's actually a guy where his everyday job is he's like a school teacher in Germany. I think he teaches like teenagers or something. And so his way of explaining himself, like, he's very good at, you know, taking a concept, making it the core of the concept, explaining that simply, and then giving examples to like show how it works, you know, basically like a teacher would do if they're trying to do a good job. Where he came up with a concept in Overwatch, which was like, he thinks every team that becomes a champion has to already have an established core of players. And then, yeah, you might change one or two players, but the core is going to define, like, you know, playing style, identity of the team.
Yeah.
I mean, in Korea, you guys call it like team color. You know, it's going to set all this up, and then you're going to tweak, like, right, we need a different piece, and X position or Y position is not quite as strong. Let's upgrade that, right? That's what's going to make it look like you win, bringing that guy in. But really, yeah, it's what you establish with those guys. Well, what you saw in the franchising in NA was because they blew every single fucking team up. I don't think there's a single team kept even 3 players in an ALCS franchise. I mean, even TSM only kept 2 players. You ended up with a scenario where everyone was paying mad money for talent, but no one knew that this talent had any identity. So if you look at the teams that ended up being the best teams, you had Team Liquid, who basically just made an all-star team. They just got like the best.
So one thing I do want to correct you on is you said there's no team that kept the 3 same players. In a way, Team Liquid did, because they kept the 3 players from Immortals and they bought their team color. They bought their system in Xmith.
Okay, yeah, I guess that sort of works. Okay, that one kind of works. But yeah, they like part of why they won also, in my opinion, is they just had the best players. Like, you look at the players they had there, they did a really good job. So they basically just won the off-season. That's all they did. It wasn't like god-tier coaching that made them win or whatever. Then you look at the other teams. So as much as people want to hate on them, the reason why 100 Thieves consistently got into strong positions in the playoffs, as far as I can tell, is just probably just coached his style of League of Legends. And he had players like Ryu, who's played with before, who did what he said. And it just, that alone was enough to get you that far. They were never that exciting a team. They never looked super dangerous, but they had enough fundamentals to get there. The rest of the teams were all over the place, precisely because it wasn't about talent. So like Echo Fox at certain points in time looked amazing. Then they looked shit. TSM looked like they had the pieces, but never got it together. Like, all these squads, Cloud9 had to literally do this drastic move to get their pieces to have like an core identity, really change everything up. Like, I think that was a mistake. Now, luckily, you don't have to repeat that mistake going into this year. Like, as long as you had a good team, you can keep at least the core of it and change a piece here and there. And I would suggest most teams change 1 or 2 pieces, but I hope that the successful squads don't try and like wipe the board clean and bring in like 4 new players. Because unless you're a bad team like a CLG or Golden Guardian, you don't need to do it. Like, it's the small tweak that's going to make you a champion, in my opinion. So I hope this year's a lot better in that reason.
Yeah, I mean, speaking a little bit on team color, I'm pretty surprised you knew that word. Team color just
I know it from Overwatch, actually, because some Korean guy in Overwatch told me that term. It's a great color concept, isn't it?
Yeah, team color basically means like the style of your team, or like what kind of setup you play. In Overwatch, there's like very distinctive team color, like dive heavy comps or like death ball comps. So like that's where it got used. But more so, speaking on that, I think a great example that you brought up, 100 Thieves, while it's not exactly what you said, I think 100 Thieves struggled a lot when they didn't find their identity or team color, where they were letting Someday play a lot of carries while he had standout carry performances. When they really found their stride was Someday on tanks and just play the bot side with Afro. And Afro really understands how to make that play style work, and they succeeded with it. Even when they lost Meteos, even when they stopped having Someday play carries, they were still able to succeed because they just had that team color that a captain knew how to coach. Or I also do think Afro played a huge role in coaching that team, not just Brawly. And yeah, they were able to make it with like not something super flashy, but a team color that they already knew how to execute. Oof. Anything you want to ask me about NA French or NA franchise?
There'll be a lot of changes. I think there'll be like a lot, like for example, if say you're not Team Liquid, because they're the only team realistically that probably could keep the same line, and maybe TSM, but I think TSM probably has to change jungler. Do you think the other teams actually like think to themselves, you know, last season wasn't good enough, let's spend and try and win this season, or do they just keep the same core and change one player or something?
So we can talk about it for like, I would differentiate teams and changing one player, or teams that only need to change one player or maybe do sub stuff. I think that would be TSM, C9, and Team Liquid. I think those three teams only need to change one player, at maximum 2, or add subs. Like they don't need to change much. They already found a recipe for success. And I know a lot of people are going to say TSM needs to change a lot. I think at max they change 2 players. Most likely they probably only change 1, or they change no players and add substitutes. And same thing for Cloud9, same thing for Team Liquid. They already have a recipe for success and they just need to do it. And then you go to the bottom tier where you have CLG, Golden Guardians, and Optic. I think those teams will change up to 4 players, 4 to 3 players. And then any other team that we didn't talk about, they're going to be somewhere between 2 to 3 player range. But I think like the bottom tier teams, Golden Guardians, CLG, those 2 teams for sure need to blow up everything. Like speaking especially about CLG, because we know a little bit about CLG now, because we know Weldon is there. They no longer have Tony. We can theory craft a little bit on CLG's roster. I love Reignover. Reignover is one of my close friends in North America, but I don't think Reignover is going to be on CLG next season. I think Reignover's, from what I know, I think Reignover's contract's really costly, and also he just doesn't fit very well with CLG solo laners. And I think for CLG, between Reignover and the solo laners, I think they're more inclined to keep the solo laners in Darshan and Huhi. Like Reignover and the solo laners are all role players and all supported players. And if you have 3 supported players playing like major carry roles, then you're just going to get, your team's not going to function.
Sure.
What do you think of the CLG roster? What do you think is going to happen?
Like, I think like I've said this ever since they lost Doublelift, the main thing they lacked for in that team was like a star player. They had now they tried to go with the angle of like, no, but if we play like the right way and we play great macro, you know, it's not going to matter. It's like, it won't matter to a point. Like you'll be in the playoffs, you'll be a good team. But there's a reason why. Go and look at every team that wins championships. They all have like one of the best players in the world or their region playing on that team. Every team. Because like one of the most underrated aspects is like, you know, when they tell kids that line, like there's no I in team, you know, you've got to play as a squad. It's not about you personally. The reason we tell kids that is because star players by default are really cocky. So you have to bring the star player down to everyone else's level by telling them, listen, it's not just about you, it's about all this. But you're doing that because, you know, naturally he's going to be assertive and believe he can win the game. I don't think you can go the other way. I don't think you can take a guy who's like, hey, you know, like I'm just a good teammate and it's not really about me, you know, and I'm not the best player. Even if he has the skill set, you can't tell that guy, it is about you actually. You're the best player in this team. Now we're going to give you all the resources, carry the game. Like those dudes have to be cocky for a reason, you know. And like the worst thing I think in CLG is maybe the double fears scared them off too much. And they thought every star player has to be like really difficult to deal with like he was at times. And so they thought instead, let's just get a bunch of cool guys. Let's get guys who just work well together. Like that's great for the supportive aspects like you're talking about. But I want my star player to really think he's the best fucking mid laner in the world. To think that like in this fight, if he's an AD carry, he's going to kill everyone. He's going to clean the whole fight up and no one can do anything against him. That's why in the past, I actually think one of the mistakes they made was, I know at one point in time, for example, they could have had Forgiven after Doublelift left. Like that would, there's another example of where what I think they misunderstood there is when someone like Forgiven comes in, because you have an awesome team of like supportive guys with a great mindset, it's going to actually allow him to be a bit of a cocky asshole, but the team to function. You've got a great balance there. Like you want a bit of that, you know, in their team. I think they've got too many like nice guys, as it were, and they're just not going to be like, and now they've lost their coach as well. Like, I don't care what you think about Weldon. Like, he can't fucking hypnotize everyone in the team and make them believe they're twice as good. Like, you know, there's only so much he can do. Like, maybe he could add 5% to the team. He's not going to make this team the LCS champion. Come on.
What do you think about the solo laners? Do you think they'll replace Hui or Darshan?
Like, that's a tough one because for Darshan, I mean, he's like the only player left at this point in time, so they probably view him as like the legacy player. I still think he's a good player. I just think he never lived up to the hype of being like the super carry top laner. Like, if anything, if you look at the best times in CLG, it was more like when he could just be a threat of sometimes playing a carry. Most of the time was just a tank player. But Hui's the one where I don't know why you would kick him now, because I would have kicked him 2 years ago. I didn't think he was a very good player back then. He's actually gotten half decent now. I'm kind of impressed with how he's developed, but I still don't think he's a top mid laner. So I personally would kick either of them. But if I had to guess, I'd say they keep both those players and it's the other players they remove.
I'm going to be a little annoying. I have information on what might happen to their solo laner, so I can't make a comment. Or else I would have made a comment regarding what happens to their solo laner.
Fair enough.
Oof.
We're close to the end of the episode now. Should we just start to wrap it up?
Yeah, let's go. What do you think of the first episode?
It was all right. The only downside is because we were doing more general stuff, because we're building up the concept, you know, we'll have some guests on in future episodes. We didn't really have like the fierce back and forth that a lot of episodes are typified by. You know, maybe my fingers have been burned by some of the LS episodes. I'll have to bring that into what we need to do. Is it's like BDSM. We have to have safe environment in which to do that, Loco. You can't just do it wildly when the other person doesn't know what you're doing, you know. They're like, hey, what's that going up my ass? What the fuck? Like, you know, you have to have a safe environment. So once we create that again, that's when the banter will fully start rolling again. It'll really get going.
I talked to Les after that episode, and what is it? Okay. We made smoochies. We were big boys. We were big boys.
Right. So I thought in general it wasn't bad. We're building it up. We get obviously the rapport's pretty good, but it'll start to pop off as the episode. And by the way, the reason why it's so ideal to start in the off season is because, you know, we can do a lot of like abstract topics. We can bring someone on to talk about coaching or how you recruit players. We can do a lot of specialist ones, but obviously when the season actually begins, the LCS, that's when we're going to pop off like a motherfucker. Because if one thing I have wanted to bring back about Summon and Insight that I couldn't get as much in Narrative Wake, because the problem is like Kelsey's style, she's not going to trash talk people. Like, she's not going to, in a way that Monty would like join in if I did that. She's not going to do that. So it meant that when I did like try to be a bit outlandish, it just fell a bit flat, because it's like everyone else in the room just feels awkward. Like, well, I don't want to say anything and join into what you just said. I'm telling you right now, when the LCS split begins, I'm going to pop off like a motherfucker on some of these players. Like I think some of the players in LCS are fucking garbage, and I'm going to go in. So don't worry. Just get ready. Just buckle your butts up, because we're bringing that back. The old me's back. Yeah.
Okay. I thought I'm going to be able to bring on my NA friends and make this show fun and like fun and educational.
All you have to tell
everyone.
them, what you need to tell them is you just tell them, listen, like a lot of it's just an act, you know, he's a good guy if you get to know him, you know, just try not to take it too personal, and then just bring him on the show and we'll just have at it.
Oh wait, I actually have to tell a story before we leave. So
okay, come on.
I recently did like a reality type show in Sweden with a bunch of people for a mobile game, and your name came up. They were like, oh yeah, Thorin. And so like some people were in CSGO and like other FPS game, and they were like, oh, we hate Thorin. He knows nothing. He just runs his mouth, and people don't want to talk back at him because he'll make a big deal on Twitter, and we don't want that kind of drama, but everyone just hates him. We'll say hi to him at events, but we hate him. I thought it was hilarious. I was just sitting there thinking, I know Thorin, and these people, when they like research me later and they see me do shows with Thorin, will be like, oh my god, that guy was Thorin's friend. I thought it was so hilarious. Like,
no, here's the thing though.
They're shit talking someone I personally know.
You know, the angle they picked there was really whack though. Like, I don't mind if they don't like me. By the way, they could even agree, like they could think I know nothing. That's all fine. But the angle that they're saying of like, you know, if they like try and respond to me, then like, you know, I'd make a big deal on Twitter. No, in reality, this is the truth. A lot of people are just afraid of the clapback. Like, The good, probably my best quality is in a game like League. I don't even call myself an expert. In CS:GO, I have actually watched the entire game for like 18 years. In League of Legends, the difference is there are a lot of people know more about me than the game, but I'm fucking good at talking and I'm very good at arguing. So even when I might not be right, I could argue and seem right on a point where the other guy might be right, but he might be fucking falling apart with his arguments. Like, he doesn't know how to make an argument, or he makes the argument the wrong way, like he does a logical fallacy, Like, unfortunately, these are things people can fall into. I'm fucking pretty good at that. So I think they're just scared. Let's be real. They're just a bit scared of coming at the fucking king. Because if you miss, I fucking put them away, mate. That's the thing. I don't have a lot of repeat battles in my career. I kill them dead the first time. Anyway, for more of that, look forward to a future episode of Listen Loco, starring me, Thorin, the guy who just goes on about shit and has a big mouth, runs his mouth a lot. I'm going to do that a lot, I promise. And then people want to come back at me. To be fair, here's the thing, actually. We'll on that line, Loco, let's agree.
You wanted to end the show, but you couldn't stop talking about yourself.
Let's agree to this, though. We will try and set up a couple of episodes where we will have people on who we know don't like us. And we'll have sort of a little contentious episode where they can bring our complaints to us, they can tell us we're wrong about stuff. I'm up for that. Like, I'm willing to let the chips fall where they may. So I think we should do a couple like that just to spice it up.
I'm so down. I'm so down to get shit on and argue.
Let's do it. I don't even mind, by the way. If someone claps back at me and they actually get me good, like they banter me, I say fair play. Like, I can give it up every now and then,
Okay. All right. Let's end the show. All right.